Peter and the disciples who are out in the boat, they've been sent ahead of Jesus. Jesus has sent them out on the lake. He stayed behind to dismiss the crowds, and then he goes up into the mountain to pray. And it says that when evening comes, they were out in the boat, and the waves were being stirred up, and it was getting a little dangerous. The wind was against them, and they were fighting hard against the wind. It says that early in the morning, they saw something coming towards them in the water, and they assumed at first that it might be a ghost. And they cried out, and they were terrified. But then immediately it says that Jesus spoke to them, and he said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And then Peter answers him, and he says, "Lord, if it is you," if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. So Jesus says to him, "Come." So Peter gets out of the boat and he starts walking on the water. Now, regardless of what we think of Peter, the fact that he was willing to take that initial step of trust, the voice of Jesus, and to step out and to begin to walk on the water, says a great deal about his character. He steps out of the boat and he begins to walk. But then he noticed a strong wind. He became frightened. He began to sink. He took his eyes off of Jesus. His trust began to fail him. He began to filled with a lack of trust. And he began to sink, and he cries out to Jesus. And it says that Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Why did you not have trust in me? Why did you not believe?" We're going to talk about trust today. Our trust ultimately in God. God wants us to be trusting. God wants us to believe that we can put our full trust in him. But there are many things that prevent this. What prevents us from trusting in God? Well, one thing that I think prevents us, one of the barriers to trusting in God, is our own personal experiences. The fact of the matter is that if we had a chance to share stories here, almost every one of us could share a story or more of times in their life when someone has broken trust with them. And while I know, these are people, and we know that people fail, somehow the accumulation of that lack of trust among us can easily lead to us not trusting God. We can't trust each other, whom we can see. How can we trust the one whom we cannot see? We've all had experiences like that. Now, it may be minor. It may be something very simple that years ago a good friend of yours just happened to, when you shared something with them in confidence, they went and shared it with somebody else, and you said, "I just can't trust that person." Or it may have been someone that you loaned some money to that you thought you could trust, and they never paid it back. Or it may have been very personal. It may have been someone that you truly believed in and loved, and they broke that trust some way or another. For some of you, that's happened many times and caused you to be very leery of other people. Sometimes we tend to also place that on God. Just learn that I can't trust. In fact, when I asked people this past week, what is the one greatest barrier to trusting God? And people just automatically immediately say, because people have been hurt by others. So that's one of the barriers, is that we've had experiences where we've just said, I can't trust that person. Or maybe we've even got to the point where we just feel like God has let us down and we can't trust God. God, I asked you for help. God, I asked you to heal my son or my daughter, and you didn't do it. Or God, I was going through a really difficult time, and I asked you to help me through, and things just didn't come out the way that I thought. There are many ways in which we could look and say, God, I just don't know that I can trust you. Or maybe we just have a negative attitude. Some people just are negative. Don't believe they can trust anybody. When I did this little exercise up here, I'm reminded of a story, and I don't know if it's true. It probably is true someplace along the line, of the dad who said to his son who was standing on the steps, "Son, jump and I'll catch you. Trust me and I'll catch you." And the son jumped and the father stepped away, and the kid hits the floor and breaks his nose and everything. He's bleeding. The father steps back and says, "Son, let that be a lesson to you never to trust anybody." How sad that is. Obviously that dad had issues, and that son's going to grow up with issues. But some people just come out with the attitude, you can't trust anybody. So why would you be able to trust God? There's a lot of barriers to it. And I don't know what all the barriers are in your life, but there are probably others as well that prevent us from truly being trusting in God. But one of the things I thought about was how blessed it is to be able to trust God. Now what are the benefits to trusting God? Are there any benefits to it? Well, there are many benefits. Just think how easy life would be if we could just trust God. If we could just put it in God's hands. Now, I need to take a moment here to explain something. God expects us to do our part. It's not as though we just step back and just put it all in God's hands. God expects us to do our part. But when we come to that point where we can't do any more, that's where we need to learn to step back and say, okay, God, now the rest is in your hands. And I think that's where many of us struggle. It can go both ways. Some people are just too lazy and they just expect God to do everything. No, do your part. But it's that point at which we have done our part, and it's at that point in which we need to step back, that suddenly it becomes very difficult for many of us to just let go and say to God, okay, God, I've done my part. I've gone as far as I can. I can't do any more. I can't do any more. It's up to you now. I've gone to the doctor. I've taken all the tests. I've done everything the doctor told me to do. Now it's up to you. Bring healing. I've done everything I can. I've earned, I've worked hard. I've earned money, and I've put away enough money hopefully to retire on, and there comes a time when I just step back and say, okay, God, now there's no more I can do. I'm going to trust in you for the rest. And what a relief it is when we can do that, when we can just step back and say, okay, it's in God's hands now. I don't have to worry about it. That's the second thing. Boy, if we could just stop worrying. Anybody here ever worry? Nobody ever worries, do they? If we really trusted God, would we ever worry? No, we all worry. Sign of our lack of trust. I worry as much as anybody. Wouldn't it be great if I could stop worrying? Think what a blessed life that would be. Think of how much more sleep you'd get. Think of how much healthier you would be. Of all the things that cause illness, and we can talk about all of the bad habits that people have and all, but I think the worst thing for health is worry. I didn't worry how much more physically healthy I'd be, mentally healthy I'd be, spiritually healthy I'd be. If I could just put it in God's hands. What a blessing that would be. If I could just hand it over to God. I'd be at ease, I'd have to stop worrying, and I'd learn I don't have to do it all myself. I don't have to do it all myself. There's someone else there that can carry on for me. Just try to imagine in your mind for a moment what it'd be like. Totally trust God. How much more blessed life would be. So how do we get there? How do we get to that point where we can just put our trust in God? Well, the first step. I want you to do a little exercise with me here. Think about this. If you want to write it down, you can write it down or do it in your head. I'm going to give you a few moments to do this as I talk, and then I'm just going to give you a few moments. Who are the top 10 people in your life right now, people that you can trust? If you can't come up with 10, come up with 3. But who's the top of the list? Who's the one person I know I can trust? Who's the person I would put all my trust in? Who's second? Who's third? Can you think about a few people like that? Go ahead and think about that for a moment. Who can I trust in this world? People. And I think I could read your minds. I think I could pick some of you out, and I could tell you exactly who you put at the